Spartan Pig,
You Spartan pig.
little SCTV back in the day.
Here it
I used to
goes.
love that show.
It's awesome.
Welcome to the Reggie Jackson 44th episode of Born in Trouble. I'm your host, John X. That's right. I said I am your host, John X. Playing the sound effects that you cannot hear, but somebody's got to prop me up.
It's all right. You gave a big up to Reggie Jackson there, so I'll take that.
There you go.
Mr. Reginald Martinez Jackson, Mr. October.
The Big Bopper. You know, the man who, when I was a child, I realized was a hit with the ladies when Sue Simmons went to Smoke Show, now a senior citizen, said live on air when Chuck Scarborough actually said, hey, he sure does swing a mean bat. And she said, he sure does. Reggie Jackson.
Reggie Jackson taking him down.
Reginald Martinez Jackson. The
Couple years-
Martinez for a Latino lover.
You know he's an advisor for the Houston Astros now.
Is he?
Really?
And a couple of years ago, for many years, he was an advisor for the New York Yankees, and the Yankees are in the postseason. So Reggie goes to walk into their clubhouse before the game, and he's not wearing a pass or anything. And so the guy stops him. Goes, excuse me, sir, you have a pass? And he goes, no, I don't have a pass. Can I get your name? And he goes, Mroctober.
Mr. October.
That is correct. He spelled Mr. October for the man. And unfortunately, somebody else walked up at that moment and was like, oh, this is Mr. Jackson. He's going to come in with me.
He was like, you saved the boy an ass whooping. The Reginald was a defensive back with Arizona State back in the day. Well, quite a tough man.
Oh,
Strong man.
he's still in good shape.
Yeah, I believe it. Reginald Martinez, big shout out.
Do us what you
Anyway.
mind, John X.
Anyway, we have with us today, besides Mr. Brooks with the good looks from Philadelphia, New Jersey, by way of wherever, parts unknown. We have Mr. Andrew Johnson, host of
What's good,
podcast?
fellas? The podcast.
What up?
You know what, John? You've been on the show, 2-3 times. You still don't know the name of it.
Justin, man, I love that we were having this conversation beforehand about preparation for our guest.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, I
It's
can't
all
hide.
good.
I can't
It's
have it.
called The 313. You put a space between the 3 and the 13, Men, Money, and Marriage.
That's right.
Just had an episode that's up this week about dark-skinned men and light-skinned men in modern-day dating. We'll check that out.
Everybody in the 313, Mr. Andrew Johnson.
Men, marriage, and money.
Men, Money, and Marriage.
Men, money, and marriage.
Yeah. Put the 313 in front of that and you'll be good to go.
If it was hosted by a woman, it would be Money, Money, and Money.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And of course, once again, from the light side and the Persistent Rumor podcast. So you should get like Yoda and put that up on your screen as your saver, and nobody will ever forget it. Just like they forget Born in Trouble. Just say, Chocolate Yoda.
What's
Yoda.
up? What's happening?
That is one of the great names in America. Chocolate
Thank
Yoda.
Yes. And it's spelled Yoddah because film studios are litigious.
That one is. But if you got $1 billion brand, wouldn't you protect it?
Without a question. Without a question. Can't just have anybody going around calling themselves Chocolate Yoda.
Well, I'm going to give you a little trivia. The film character Yoda, the name Yoda, was not invented by Star Wars or Lucas or anybody. It's actually a Sanskrit word. It's a name very popular in the Sanskrit language, and it just means hero.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
So they stole the word hero from us. Do they have no boundaries?
Yes.
Well, they stop nowhere.
So the answers are no and no.
no, and no. Chocolate Yoda. I had to have Chocolate Yoda back because, as I was saying show, he was a guest about I think it was 3 weeks now, 3 episodes back, and we had such a great conversation about his favorite guy, Mr. Donald Trump. You know, if you listen to Yoda's show, The Persistent Rumor, you can come away with that show with only one synopsis, which is vote for Trump.
Yeah.
This is how we get the audience in. So you have this thing in. I had put the post up, I put the wrong audio up, I put the second audio up, and every other place got it except for Spotify. So if you're Spotify, to my knowledge, you've been listening to an episode from over a year ago. Very good episode, but it's not the episode with Chocolate Yoda. It's like, and I take offense to them trying to silence the man trying to silence us. He's trying to shut us down, bro. We can't have that. It's bad enough that wisdom has already sold us out. So our brothers have to come here to have conversations now. And big shout out to Reggie Reg out there in Ohio right now, as well
Yes,
as
sir.
Mr. Grant Lancaster and Mr. Gene Hopkins. So
Purple
anyway,
pie, purple pie.
Purple Pie Hopkins. You guys don't know anything about that, but you should. So anyway, I want to start this conversation with something that's really exclusive to kind of Mr. Brooks and me. Our old high school has been caught up in this whole thing about having to change the name of the Brentwood Indians because of the slight to the indigenous people to something new. And they made an announcement this morning that the new name is the Brentwood Spartans.
They're the Spartans now?
Yeah, they're the Spartans. I didn't know
Yeah,
you heard that.
That
Yeah.
ain't gonna fly.
Nah, it's like people are very upset with that. Personally, I
I
had submitted. Go ahead. Go
I'm
ahead, Grant.
indifferent, but Spartans is not gonna work.
Spartans isn't gonna work. I had submitted Bears. Nobody on Long Island has that name. I thought it was a good name. It actually made the Final Four, which was surprising, but they didn't put that I had suggested it, so that's probably why it made it. Because if I would have suggested it, probably would have gotten no votes. I'm that popular in the town. Um, so, but anyway, it's now the Brentwood Spartans, and people are upset because, of course, it's mostly Caucasian people who no longer live in the town and haven't seen it in over decades. And they're upset about the fact that that the name has been changed from Indians to Spartans. And I always find it interesting because I've pointed it out a couple of times that you're not really doing our educational system too much justice by trying to continue to call us the Indians, because Indians live in Asia, in India. That's where Indians live. To have the name Indian and a man in a headdress, to me, is the first like slight on your community. It's like you're too stupid to know that that's not an Indian, that's an indigenous person. So they're fighting to keep the stupidity. That's the first thing. The second thing is that it's offensive. Why are these people like fighting to keep this offensive name? Personally, my other suggestion was the Free Lovers, because what people don't know about our town is that it started out as a town called Modern Times in the 1800s, where polygamy was a thing. And apparently it wasn't popular back then either. So they changed the name somehow to Brentwood.
Well, it's still popular in Brentwood.
Free love, right?
Free love is very popular in Brentwood.
Free love. I was thinking, I thought Free Lovers was the perfect name for the town because, even when it was suburban back in the 70s, there were some times when we probably led the island in teen pregnancies. So that, like, it kind of showed our roots were still all there. We were still polygamous to a certain extent. So, and the Spartans are really, the history of the Spartans, they're a very fierce group, but they also fight for their lovers. A lot of them lived in their groups and they ended up having relations with one another, and they felt like that made the bond between the soldiers stronger because you fight for your lovers more. So, in a way, it does kind of fit with the free lovers theme in a roundabout way. But
Nah,
No,
nah, nah.
you guys have nothing to. You guys are free. You're free to comment on this if you know. Do
Like,
you?
I
Did
get why the name change had to happen. I'm all
you?
for that. I'm cool with it. I'm indifferent to what they name it, but the Spartans is stupid.
Okay. I was just thinking free lovers would be good because when I played basketball, I'd be like, free love, free love. Gotcha. Anyway,
Really? With that upright jump shot of yours, that was free love what you was giving away?
free love, baby. Free love.
And this is a high school team?
This is
Our local, high school in Long
Yeah.
Island, New York.
So
Yeah.
Spartan is a real overreach. I mean, you know, it's appropriation to start with, but also it's high schoolers. Like, let's not give them the name of this warrior culture that's
We
that had a long history of hardening their young men. It's just kind of silly.
of pardoning the young men. Odd you would use that term. But
Yeah, you're still on the gay love thing. Okay.
well, I mean, look, I mean, if it makes you a better fighter, I understand.
It just
But it's like
the Spartans actually were a very sophisticated society, and even though they were centered on being a warrior culture, they were extraordinarily well-rounded people. They were all like poets and songwriters and singers and musicians and philosophers, and they had a great sense of humor. They really appreciated sarcasm, and they also had sort of a very equal type of society where men and women were viewed as equally important. And they had no problem with the fact that when men were out in battle for sometimes months at a time, they still had sexual needs that were satisfied by other men. And yeah, I imagine it would make them better soldiers, but certainly it would make them happier people. And I think that was probably what their main motivation was.
so what you
everybody loves a glory hole.
right, right. So and Steve Rob. Um what I'm saying is that, and I'm not knocking at him whatsoever. I just find it really funny and ironic that these people that are really uptight about the fact that we're changing the logo from Indian because it's like it's offensive to some people, a lot of people. It's racist at the very least, soft racism at its best. And we're changing it to the Spartans. And they voted for that. And that's a society that was about free love, baby. So it's like we're going back in a
Oh,
circle.
but who are the they that voted for it? I have a feeling that there's a very small group that voted for this.
Well, I think that that's the popular opinion that this isn't actually indicative of a vote. Somebody just decided we're going to be Spartans today, and But I just found it funny. It's like you really can't get it right. I thought Bears was a great name, and I have no problem with Spartans. Were they alive today? They probably be able to kill me because they played with swords.
Like, there aren't any
And
bears on Long Island, though.
that's
Our
true.
bears are big and tough. There are no bear you gotta go all the way up to, like, upstate New York to get bears.
Well, that's what would make it unique. You're coming to town, you're gonna face the only bears in the area. Us. Right?
I'm sure, there's enough bears in town, call up our boy Carlos, and he'll tell us who all the bears were. We didn't know.
Yes.
We didn't know that was a thing back in the day, but Carlos will tell us who all the bears were. Like, I'm
Yes.
sure there are some bears in Brentwood, but they could have just gone for something that was like, it's a high school sports. Do it really have to be fierce? Can't they just be competitors? Like, do we have to try to make everybody into, like, the most vicious thing we can?
That's true. That's true. And
Like,
you know what?
go more with the free love thing than the
I like the free love thing. And like Yoda was saying, the Greeks were intelligent and they were an advanced culture. So they would probably get and they liked irony and they got that. So they'd probably enjoy this podcast right now, the irony of what I'm saying. about what's going on. So at least I hope they would. Were they alive? I guess there's no way to actually go back and prove it. A big shout out to Carlos Lopez, our friend and friend of the show. Big Carlos. So anyway, let's get into it. We're going to go from one sexual topic, one very hot sexual topic, to another very hot sexual topic. I almost said sexual chocolate.
Sexual chocolate.
Sexual chocolate.
Go get my
And
sweatshirt.
we're talking about the red hot love life of the former president, Mr. Donald Trump.
Wow. I'm amazed you refer to him as president. I'm impressed.
I said former. I said former.
Yeah,
You did say former.
I don't care. I can't imagine anyone identifying him as a president.
You
But
like to
anyway.
identify him more as the defendant?
I just call him dump.
Donnie Trump.
That
And
too?
if I use the word former, I follow it with White House squatter.
Nice.
Mm. So tell us how you really feel, Chocolate Yoda. What do you think? Is this guy going down? Is he going down in this trial?
So you're asking me, is he going to get convicted of the 34 counts that he's accused of? Almost
I,
certainly.
I'll take 17 of them. You think so?
I mean, it only takes one, right? But I mean, it's almost certain. Well, because it's the only reason it's 34 counts is because there's 34 checks.
Mhm.
So but so it's the same crime just done 34 times. So yeah, it's almost certain that he's going to be convicted. And I'll give a quick summary. And this is a little inside baseball when it comes to jury psychology. In the science of jury selection, we kind of know that jurors make up their minds about guilt or innocence after the opening arguments, right? So they already know how they're going to vote. We just have to go through waiting for them to be asked what their opinion is to find out if all of them reach the same conclusion.
Mm.
Now, historically, Dump has done terribly in front of juries. Anytime he's been in front of a jury, he loses. Now, this is the first time it's a criminal case, but in civil court, every time he's in front of a jury, he loses. And the only thing that makes it worse than losing is if he testifies, he loses even worse.
Mm-mm.
So I'm sure that his defense team, which is the equivalent of the Keystone Cops, they don't want him to testify. But if he insists on testifying, they can't stop him.
Mm.
And he's so stupid that he might actually testify.
Mm.
Not that he needs to. It doesn't matter whether he does or doesn't. But if he testifies, it'll guarantee that he's going to get hit real bad. I mean, he's already at the point he's committed. He broke the gag order like 12 times already.
Mm.
And almost every time he talks or posts something, he breaks the gag order. He violates the gag order. So he actually could be facing jail time during the trial.
So
How do you put this is the trick question, but how do we put a former president who has Secret Service protection the day he dies? How do we put him in prison?
It's easy. If you're referring to, I'll give you two scenarios. If it's because of the gag order, there's a jail right outside the courthouse. He doesn't have to be sent to Rikers or anything like that, and the Secret Service can easily accommodate that. If it's as a criminal, that's also easy. The federal government has an option to have a prison for one person. And it can be any kind of facility that can be secured. It could be an old bank, it could be an old warehouse, whatever it is. And there's tons of abandoned buildings all over the country and certainly in New York. And if it's a prison for one, the Secret Service is allowed to turn over the care of that person to the government.
Wouldn't you think that that place would be a high risk for a attack? I mean, honestly, like what the thing that the most
From whom and for what purpose?
well from these crazy radicals from a
One
couple
of his minions.
To do
yeah,
what?
one of his minions to break them out to
Okay, so
put 'em-
that's true of every prison. So here's the thing: any decision that's made about any criminal has to be made based on whether he's proven guilty or not. If he's proven guilty, you could come up with all sorts of scenarios why it'll be dangerous to put him in jail or whatever. If you want to be fanciful about it, you could say, well, what if unicorns invade? Who gives a fuck? Like, put the guy in jail in the right way and worry about jailing him after, because we've already got these systems in place.
Rob, you had something to say or
I'm kind of hoping that he gives us this gift of testifying. I mean, I know from a legal standpoint, it's the dumbest thing he could ever do.
Which
But
almost guarantees that he's going to do it.
the amount of
Yeah.
hubris that he carries, that he exudes, he almost can't stop himself from this. Like
Not
yeah,
almost, not
That's it.
almost. He incriminated himself yesterday.
yeah, he's
Well, that was what I was going to
time
say.
bomb.
Yeah,
I was
he
gonna
was
say that
he was
when he
talking about the payments, and he said, "Oh, we I made the payments to my lawyer. My accountant told me to list it as legal services, and we didn't even write it off on our taxes." And it's like, wait a second, every business in the world writes off legal services on their taxes. So what you're telling us is that you didn't
You
because you were trying to cover it up.
exactly.
And that's how the jury's going to hear it. And I guarantee you that Alvin Bragg is going to play that video for the jury.
Mm.
Did
How
anyone
much
find it a little ironic that in a case involving a porn star and former president slash reality TV show host, that the first witness's name was David Pecker?
Yeah, I did an audio post yesterday and I called it "Dump Got Fucked by a Pecker."
oh my gosh. And I mean
Ongoing.
you said hard going.
It's
Yeah, I
ongoing.
mean, two
Okay.
days in a row. I mean,
Yeah.
the thing of it is that thi- this is a criticism of the mainstream media. I would advise everybody to completely ignore mainstream media. They are useless. They are not giving you the truth. And one example that I can give of that is that everywhere you look, this is referred to as the hush money trial. Okay. It is not a hush money trial. You know why? Because paying someone hush money is not illegal.
Mm,
You are allowed to pay people hush money.
mm,
If two or more parties say, "Hey, we agree that I'm going to give you money so that you withhold the information that you have about me," there is nothing illegal about that. This is a business records fraud trial and an election interference trial. And this is why it's a felony, because business fraud is a misdemeanor. Business records fraud is a misdemeanor. And the only time it becomes a felony is when you do it in furtherance of another crime. So because he did it for the purpose of interfering with the 2016 election, now it's a felony, and that's what the case is about. It's got nothing to do with hush money. Hush money is just the vehicle through which he decided to lie.
You see, it's interesting that you would say that because I don't watch the mainstream news anymore either. I told you guys when I came in today, I did, because I was like completely exhausted. I told you, Yoda, before everyone else came on. I turned on the news and I listened to what was going on to the trial for about 10 or 15 minutes before I knocked out. And it was like a lullaby to me. It was like sweet baby music. But prior to that, one of the reasons why I stopped watching the mainstream news is because of the fact that I realized something. Despite all of the things and all of the radical points of view that state that the media is out to lynch Trump and all this other stuff, And, Rob, you had said something like this about it before. The truth of the matter is, they're rooting for the guy. And you kind of just proved it, because even that term, the hush money trial, you just pointed out that that is not a crime whatsoever. So even in the back of your minds, and this is how, like, people, the five people that listen to the show on a regular basis and everything, this is why you listen to the show, because we point out things. We're about to point something out to you that of how you're being moved around. This
Yeah.
trial is not about, they're not phrasing it as if he did anything wrong. A hush money trial is not anything wrong. They
Yeah.
root for Trump. They love Trump because Trump brings them ratings.
Right.
And,
Wes Moon has admitted that.
yeah,
Yeah.
Back
Yes,
in
he did.
2015, they asked him, "Why are you covering dumps so much?" And he said he's good for ratings.
he's
End of
good for it.
story. And
So,
it's the same reason that Las Vegas has the odds even right now. It's the same reason why the polls are being manipulated to show that it's a dead heat, because they have to make it a horse race,
mhm.
right? And also no one's paying attention. So it's such a there's maybe 1% of the American public is paying attention to the presidential race right now, because we know historically people don't even start to dial in until after Labor Day. They're too busy with their lives. Nobody gives a fuck about any of this stuff. And they probably shouldn't. But when the way the media manipulates the narrative is very, very important, because propaganda is delivered through language, and the language that the media uses is purposefully obscuring the truth of what's going on. Like, here's an example. Maybe about 3 months ago, Donnie Dump, in one of his Hitler rallies that he calls a campaign stop, um, used the phrase, "Immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country."
Mm.
Does that sound familiar to anybody?
Yeah, that's right out of the Hitler's playbook. Well,
Yeah.
his wife was an
Yes, that was
immigrant.
a Third Reich propaganda talking point, okay? And you know what the media reported on the following morning? Biden's old. Like, hey, motherfucker, we know he's old,
Mhm.
okay?
They both are old.
But no one mentioned the fact that the leading candidate for the Republican Party echoed once again a Nazi talking point.
Well, the question that has to become is, why are they doing this? What is the distraction that they're trying to
Ratings,
keep
it's
you?
all about ratings. You
Yeah.
already answered.
What is?
They have to look, journalism stopped being journalism a long time ago. Okay. The founders, as flawed as they were, and they were extraordinarily flawed, they had enough wherewithal to understand that someone has to watch the watchers. And that's why I believe journalism is the only industry mentioned in the Constitution originally, and why it's referred to as the fourth estate is because it's important to maintain the integrity of the government by knowing that someone is watching them and reporting on them. But as Edward R. Murrow pointed out in 1958, once you turn journalism into entertainment and start charging advertising dollars and all this stuff, it corrupts journalism. And of course, he was 100% right.
Mhm.
Well, back when he was on, it was journalism was a lost leader for the network.
Yeah,
They didn't have to generate any money. Where now,
right,
we have 24-hour news, and
right,
they're required to generate
right,
revenue.
right.
So
And
that's part of the
originally,
problem.
the only reason why broadcast companies and newspapers included news is because it was part of their FCC license requirement.
Yeah.
That's you had to provide socially relevant content, and everybody decided, okay, let's do news. And news just used to be, this is what happened here, that's what happened over there, this team won here, that team won over there. That's what news was. And also they would tell you, what happened in local politics and all that other stuff, and any national news. That's what news was. That's what the 11 o'clock news was. For a half hour a day, you got a wrap up of the last 24 hours, and it was always old at that point, but that's what news was about, just to maintain their broadcast license. That's why it was on late at night
Mhm.
because they it wasn't that important. And then once they figured out, oh, we can actually make money on this shit, that's when everything changed.
You speak about the differences between lifestyles of in the 70s and the 80s, where even 50s, going back even further, 40s, 50s, 60s. Walter Cronkite was once one of the most famous people in the world. Everybody knew who Peter Jennings was. Everybody knew who Tom Brokaw was. Everyone knew who these anchors were that were sitting here and they were giving you the news at this point. And the job was just really about, like you said, reporting what had happened without the bias. As soon as they start putting the bias in,
Right.
it's different. But the reason why it was even more so different is because you didn't have this like consistent 24/7 cycle. So you could watch the news, or maybe you didn't watch the news. And it goes out and it permeates everything else that's in your life. So, in the community where you watch the news 24/7, now you want to know whether or not your neighbors are Democrats or Republicans. In the world before that, it wasn't so important because you may watch the news, you may not watch the news, but 24/7, whatever's going on in your neighborhood is what you're paying attention to. That's what's getting your attention. That's what's getting everything. You don't have these great big media cabals, and you don't have Russian interference where people can come in and they can like write memes to the American people to get people to move one way or another way.
But
And
this is all a continuation of the Reagan Revolution, though. Like, he got in there and took out a lot of the guideposts and made it so that, you know, one company can own, huge swaths of the media. Like a
Right.
buddy of
That's why
mine.
Sinclair runs almost all of the Republican messaging. And by the way, can anyone tell me why Republicans love Reagan so much when he did so many things that they hate?
yeah,
I
Well, you
don't
know what?
understand this.
You know what, Yoda? I talked about this before when I was teaching DEI, because I taught DEI for 10 years. And I told a bunch of Republicans that if Reagan was in the party, you would throw him out the party today. He
Oh,
could
yeah.
not be he could not be a Republican. He would be literally
Yeah.
thrown out of the party.
Yeah,
That's
well,
how far it's changed, though.
he increased taxes 7 of his 8 years because he had to. Because when he cut
Mhm.
taxes his first year, he blew the deficit up by 300%. And then he did gun control. He negotiated with terrorists. He gave amnesty to almost 3 million illegal aliens. And he was probably the largest drug dealer in American history. So I don't quite understand why they love this guy so much.
well, the first thing that you said is really why they love him. He cut taxes, and he was the first one to say the hell with the deficit. Up until Reagan, it was an actual thing that you ran on to be president, that you would be able to balance the budget.
Yeah.
After Reagan, it was no longer an issue because he cut my taxes. I have more money to spend. That's all I
Well,
really
they
care
have
about.
Okay,
more money to
but that
spend.
lasted a year, so it doesn't make sense to me.
But
The,
the
the,
joy
the corporations got to
reverberates.
keep their tax cuts. The rest of us had to deal with the pain.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the same thing Dump did in 2017. He signed
Yeah.
that tax law into effect that helped his friends and screwed everybody else.
right. And they feel like they still feel like they're going to get something from this guy. I was more invested when Trump was actually president with the things that he was actually doing than I am now. And to me, the way my brain works is if something doesn't make sense, I just throw that shit out after I see it. I'll tell you one time, and then I just throw the shit out. I don't remember the exact reason why, but I know that there's something there, that there's a reason why I don't like what this motherfucker's doing. And a lot of his tax policies, like for example, he had given these people a cut one time or given them a check. And then if you go a little bit deeper, what actually ended up happening was it actually ended up costing every American citizen $600 individually in a different place where he cut the money from a different place. So you didn't actually get, it's not even like you got to come up. You actually ended up losing, you know, and people don't have the patience to learn these things anymore. And they don't really care because all they
I don't
think
agree
about
with I don't
is
agree with either of
quick.
those things. It's not about patience or caring. People are worked half to death. They don't have time to get into this stuff.
Well,
And that's on purpose.
what it does is no, I agree with you there, but what it does is it allows for the value of instant gratification to go up higher. So that's the reason why they're still popular. You're trying to figure out why they're still popular. It's because of the fact that just the simple fact that the guy says, I'm going to write you a check and I'm going to put Trump on the check. And it's an instant gratification thing that you can actually see right then and there. See, you don't get it, Yoda, because you think multi-leveled. So it's like
Yeah,
you're not
my
putting
son
yourself.
explained this to me. I'm not as dumb as these people, so I'll never understand them, and that's fine. I can
But,
live with that.
but 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 in order, I no, and that's a good thing to be able to live with. But you have to. It's like when you empathize with people. I don't even say it's empathy. I think it's just the skill to be able to put yourself in other people's shoes. And I just
Listen,
happen to have.
I can empathize with you. Look, if I hold my breath long enough till I almost pass out, I understand these
Mhm.
people, but that's not how I live my life most of the time.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't make it right. Like I'm not excusing the overall
I
answer,
know
but
you just try to understand it because I've been into psychology since I was in junior high, so this stuff fascinates me. I try to get into the heads of people, and of course, it's a multivariate analysis. It's not just one thing that's
Mhm.
wrong with these people, but most of what's wrong with them, it's the lethal combination of stupidity and propaganda. That's just going to ruin you.
And also ego. Because let's be honest, everyone wants to feel like they're important. Everyone wants to feel like their thing is the thing. I was reading something online this week. This guy, it was like something about the military. Military deserves raises more than people deserve to have their student loans reduced and everything. And it was one of these like Russian generated memes. And I'm like, wow, this is really how they're tearing people apart. Because truth of the matter is, it's not exclusive to one or the other. It actually should be both things. The military should get more raises, and college shouldn't cost so much that when you're 50 years old, you should have a higher balance at 50 years old than you had at 22 when you first graduated. Both of these things are actually true, but this is what they do. They get the red ants and the black ants together. Nobody's angry. Then they shake the jar, and all of a sudden, it's a death war. It's a war to the end. And this is what we have. And media doesn't care because they just want to get ratings. They get money off of it. Everyone gets money off of it. As long as the money keeps going and the status quo stays the way that it is, nobody's complaining. And that's the problem with a lot of things on this earth. I'm
Well,
looking. Go ahead, Ryan.
lots of people are complaining. That's the reason why crime rates are up. That's the reason
No,
why violence is
crime
up.
rates are not up. Crime
Crime
rates
not
not
that crime rates
that's
are not up, but
absolutely
yeah,
incorrect.
but
Crime rates are not up.
the
Crime rates are down
yeah,
across the board
mhm,
in every
Well,
state. Crime rates are down. They're
but
not as they're down less in red states than there are in blue states, but crime is down.
well,
but
go ahead. I'm finishing.
the wave of the types of crime that we're seeing now, the types of lawlessness that we're seeing in some places now, um, you
I
know,
don't get that. What lawlessness are we talking?
in Philadelphia, we had, and I'm gonna forget the number now, but I think we're averaging well over 500 gun deaths a year. I mean, we a regular weekend in Philadelphia is 15 people getting shot. Like that type of lawlessness, what I'm talking about. And
Okay.
that's out of the desperation. That's the people complaining. That's the people who the services have been cut, the access has been taken away from, and that's
Yeah.
how they're responding to it. They're not responding to it in the traditional methods by going and marching on the offices of the people who have taken the stuff away from them. They've exited the system and have taken things into their own hands.
And they've gone to extremities.
Right. And even
As a
though that statistic sounds dramatic, and of course it is, it's still lower than it was.
I
Well,
can
if you
I
go
can
back
ag
to the 90s, it's lower than what it was in the 90s when it peaked,
Yeah.
but it is cycling downward. But let me
Yes.
just say this really, really quick. You know, when we're talking about, you know, a politician or someone who the media will, sort of fall in love with. And then, the people who will support him, they're going to fall in line. But the issue is what people never really talk about is that his popularity stems from two things. Essentially, white males see his lifestyle and they want to be him. And the other thing is he says the racist things that they can't say.
Well,
And he gets away with it. And a lot of people, they will never say it, but a lot of our elections, a lot of the things that we vote on, a lot of it is purely based on race. Nobody wants to be that in the bottom of the barrel. So white males right now feel threatened. They have to find someone to blame, even though a lot of it is, could be a corporation that might have closed down some businesses in their town. And now the only thing there is Walmart and Dollar Tree. They're upset and angry. And so now there's a news media conglomerate telling them the immigrants are taking your jobs. And this is what the issue is. They have to point the
Right.
finger to someone without actually telling them who's actually responsible for doing it.
let me
Yeah,
just
and
say
that's what
this.
the Southern strategy was all about. That's Nixon's time, and right before Nixon, the Republican Party jumped the shark. They decided, you know what, we're not going to run on policies, we're not going to run on governance, we're going to run on wedge issues, and they convinced the ruling culture in America that someone was going to get them and someone was going to replace them, and they're still doing that shit now.
Well, I'm just gonna I find this whole conversation extremely interesting. Let me just fix my camera here. Seems a little bit blurry. But all of these things are all interrelated. And it's all tied together, and it's all tied together with what you guys always talk about. Yoda, you know a lot about the politics and everything. To me, it's all economics. And everything that was said here from Rob, you going back and you talking about what's going on in Philadelphia, you speak to a level of desperation and hopelessness for a certain segment of people. You're right. It's not, and we're both right. We've talked about this on the show before. We don't get into, in the 70s and the 80s, the city was violent. Taking the subway, we've all been on the subway in New York City at that time. It could be dangerous, but the beatings were different and the things you could come back from. You didn't have all of these people just coming out and shooting. And in Caucasian, other areas, everywhere, we're seeing these angry, desperate shootings from people that are just coming in and they're just like, we never saw people just coming in and just like taking out swaths of people that they didn't know. And that's what we get now. We get in certain areas, it's just like because they show it on TV. They show it on TV because it gets ratings. And I'm going to bring something else up. I do want to get into we're going to take the last 10 minutes and we're going to talk about what's going on with this Columbia University situation. But I was reading an article that was very interesting to me because last couple of weeks it's been on my mind about what's been going on with Silicon Valley, these companies, these tech companies that are cutting all these jobs and people coming back they cut jobs, they get jobs in another place, but they're shrinking the number of people. San Francisco has seen their real estate market, the bottom fall completely and totally out of it. This is a place where just 10 years ago, Oakland and San Francisco, right there, you couldn't get a property. You couldn't get a 2-bedroom house for less than $1 million. And they have properties that were being put up for 8.3 million that are being sold for 3 now. Properties that were bought that were $2 million and now being sold for 1.1, just because people are trying to get out of that market before it completely and totally crashes. And tech people over the past 2 decades have made great salaries. They've probably been the highest paid sector in the United States of America. But now I think what people aren't talking about is they're not talking about the shrinkage in the tech sectors. They're not talking about the money which is flowing up to the Jeff Bezos, to the Elon Musk, to those people. and the money that's no longer going to those tech people. And the reason why is because those tech people, they got their money and they didn't really give a fuck about anybody else. They don't care, they keep trudging along with this AI thing and all these things that have cut jobs and have made things more efficient because they were getting paid. But what people don't understand about long-term planning is that long-term planning requires the consideration for people who are going to be out of work. It used to be with automation, if you were going to lose your job as a machinist, your job might actually offer you the opportunity to go to college, to learn another trade, to do something different. That's something that they used to offer in the jog
Yeah, but
segment.
that's by the way, that's never worked out.
It's never worked out, but at least they made the effort. They even made the
Yeah,
lie.
but that's it's meaningless. If it didn't work out, it doesn't matter if they made the effort to do it. It's just not a thing. The idea that displaced workers could suddenly get into new careers literally has just never happened.
So what do you do with the displaced worker? You just give him a gun and you let him go out and like
No,
kill
not no.
themselves?
I mean, obviously, that's obviously a silly option, but it's not one or the other, right? Like the fact is that technology always displaces workers, and it sucks. It's an awful thing, but there's no ice delivery men anymore, right? When I was growing up, a guy used to pull up in a truck with these really big tongs, and he used to bring walk a block of ice into each apartment because we didn't have freezers at the time. And then when they put freezers in refrigerators, suddenly there were no ice delivery guys anymore. Just like there's no typewriter repair people anymore.
You're
All
discussing
right.
you're saying a very realistic reality based upon what's actually happened. But for Andrew, the question that no, based upon what's actually really happening. It's important
Yeah.
that you point that out though,
Yeah.
because like a lot of people don't live in reality. They don't. They don't live in reality.
Yeah. I'm
They
I'm
vote for
fond of
Trump.
living a reality based life.
Right, but they vote for Trump because they don't wanna because they wanna why, Andrew? They associate with Trump, right? They wanna be him.
Yes.
They wanna have his woman, they wanna have his money and
Yes.
everything. But how are they gonna do that if, like Yoda says, they can't even deliver they can't own an ice company anymore. The
You
guy
know
who
what it
owned the ice company could actually live a life like Trump, but now that guy doesn't exist, so now he's sitting next to you.
well, you know something, here's the deal. When Yoda was saying that they don't replace those jobs, and even if they give them the training, what they basically do, and this goes back 30 years plus, whenever they close a bunch of manufacturing plants or different coal mining areas, anything along those lines, where thousands of people get laid off.
They introduce meth. Oh, sorry.
That and they build a private prison. And so the a lot of the laws, what they require is that if you build that prison in that area, you generally have to hire 50% of the people have to be local who you hire.
Mhm.
So that's one of the alternatives to closing down some of these factories and manufacturing type jobs. They build a private prison.
And
And s-
that also will create enemies of any type of DEI or actually race-based programs that are based upon keeping minorities, black people, for example, who have been targets of these programs, these jail programs out of jail. This is the
Well,
reason why they're so angry
yeah.
when you try to go into neighborhoods and you try to counsel people on how to stay out of jail. The police officers don't live in those neighborhoods. They live in the suburbs. They come in, they scofflaw all day long. They get people to send upstate to take them out of the neighborhoods. So that way they can make the neighborhood better that they don't live in, that they have to patrol. They're literally cherry picking.
Well, we could thank the 13th Amendment for that, right?
Mm.
That is correct.
yeah,
I mean, look, I think it's literally there in like the first sentence. Like, yeah, you're there's no more slavery unless you're a prisoner,
Mm.
right? That's when it started. That's when sundown laws started and black codes and all that bullshit. It's, when you make a prison for profit, then obviously there's going to be motivation to fill that prison as much as possible. That's why in America the recidivism rate is 67%, which is fucking
Would,
insane.
would white Americans love the prison system as much if they were targets of it?
Of
Well,
course
you know
not.
what's happening though, John? I tell you, to be honest with you, the prison population more recently, the color is getting a little bit lighter. You get my drift. Not to say that was their intended goal,
Mhm.
but for someone who worked in the system for 26, 27 years, you start to see a subtle shift. It doesn't mean that there's more. There's still, black is still the dominant race. However, the numbers are sort of getting caught up a little bit.
Well,
And
that's
Right.
a lot of
probably
that
because
has to do,
the prison system is predicated on poverty mostly.
it's when y'all were talking about these certain areas closing down these these plants and these jobs, the towns are basically turning to ghost towns. There's nothing for them to do but get high. I mean,
And they
as far
start
as
selling meth, and then
yeah,
they wind
but
up
what
in
I
the
s- and
pokey.
so but that's what's basically you're seeing that happen, and so where they're coming into the prisons they're coming in more from the rural areas of the country, and the more rural just means more white, and so they're coming in from those areas because of this automation, AI, and all of these other technology things that are causing them to lose their jobs, and so that's where you're starting to see that shift, and no one was complaining before
Mhm.
because majority of the inmates were black. But now
Oh,
there's laws
poor
coming out
white
now.
folks. Oh, I feel so
Yeah. Well,
bad for
now
them. You know
well,
what they
that's the
need to
thing
do?
is,
They need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
the rule. Well, what they're doing now is you're starting to see the with the prison population getting to this point, they're starting to come up with more creative ways to figure out, hey, how can we, make these laws maybe not so harsh like they were in the 80s and 90s.
Mm.
Just to say like not in a bad way, but just to say like, hey, you know, we have all these inmates in here doing all this time and they got to go home at some point. So why are we giving them all the time up front in the first place?
It never mattered. There's a joke, and an ancient joke that folks tell all the time, and little kid walks into his parents' bedroom and catches his mom and dad going after it. The dad freaks out, like, "Billy, get the hell out of here! Get out!" So
This is a great joke, by the way.
they get done. Now dads feel a little bit bad about yelling at little Billy, so he goes to try and find little Billy, goes all around the house, can't find him. Hears a noise coming from the basement, goes down the steps, and there's little Billy, and Billy's got grandma bent over the couch, and he's hitting her from behind. And dad freaks out, "Billy, what the hell are you doing? That's your grandmother. That's sick. Stop that." And the kid turns around and says, "It's not so funny when it's your mom, is it?" And that's basically, what you're talking about. In the 90s, it was crack. Everybody was high and everybody was a criminal. Now here in the 2020s, it's a different drug and a lot of them are white. And now we found compassion because it's
I think
not
you're
so funny
talking.
when it's your mom.
I think you're talking about meth and Percocets and all those other
Meth,
drugs that are very
Percocets,
popular.
you name it, Trank,
Right? Very good.
whatever. It's
Very
all
good.
bad. It's all bad, but they've now found some compassion because it's their people.
Well, listen.
And that humans are tribal like that.
Let me explain to you why it's all bad social planning. Okay, you can criminalize black people very easy during the crack era. As long as crack was prevalent in the ghetto, as long as people had food stamps and extra money that came and they were actually doing well, they were doing better than they were quote unquote supposed to be doing, and there was more money in the hood. What's the whole thing about? There's no money in the hood, but yet everybody's opening up stores on every corner from every other community except for black people. But there's no money there, but there's money in the hood. But now you don't have crack anymore. You don't have cocaine anymore so much. You've taken weed and you've legalized weed. So now you don't even have your local spots. You don't have your Nick spots and stuff like that where you can go and you can get your stuff and it's nice and easy. They've taken all the illegal money out of it. So now black people are, quote unquote, you can't even, you really have to make up stuff in order to arrest them. It's like very difficult. So now the causal factor, what happens is like Andrew says, prisons are starting to lighten up a little bit because there's not as much stuff there. Money's not actually flowing there. You're not seeing those things happen anymore. People are shooting each other over different reasons, staring at each other, gang affiliations. They've got rap music to do that, to make people mad. But it's not big enough. It's not a big enough number for them. So they're going to have to work on that one for as far as like engineering and planning is concerned, if they want to get the numbers back up for black people, because right now it's looking like it's trending in a different direction. And that might be why they have the migrants come in. So, hey, this has been a great conversation.
Is there a time in the near or far future in which, you know, all of the damage, and, you know, I may be alone in this thought, but all the damage that rap music has done to our community, and they actually, you know, sort of have to be accountable for that?
Who would be accountable? You mean the white executives or the black people that actually took the jobs and made the money? Because
Could
I
be
mean,
both.
Well,
should
what's the damage? I'm not aware of this.
I mean, we're the only group that makes music that downs ourself. We're the only group
That's not
that
true.
has caged ourself in that way
That's not
in
true at all.
popular music.
No, that's not true at all. But okay. But so what is the result of that? Let's say that's true. What was the result of the music downgrading ourselves?
well, I mean, you
The
go from
the
the
type of
19
behavior
type of
that
behavior.
goes
Like
along with it, the type of stunting. Like,
like
guys, it started off as a fantasy, then it became sort of a reality, and now all these guys think they're gangsters now, and a lot of people listening think they're gangsters now.
mhm. And
That's not
this wasn't going on before rap music?
not in the same way. I mean, obviously, a lot of other things have
Mhm.
changed too, but not in the same way.
Yeah.
I don't
I mean,
think.
I'd
if
love
you want to,
I think the causation correlation thing is a big question mark there, but I'd love to drill down into that because I'm sure there's studies that might come to different conclusions about that.
well, we could have a conversation on it. Not right now, but if we go all the way back from, there are people who said that movies like Superfly, changed the entire black community. Because before Superfly, everybody was just a normal black person that came up and there was a community and there were things that were going on in that way. And then when Superfly came out, everybody all of a sudden wanted to become a badass mofo and get a Cadillac and start pimping women and things of that nature. And that changed the community. That was the message for that time that changed the community. Not everybody, but some people. But the culture was such that it wasn't going to take over everyone at that time. These message delivery systems have gotten progressively better over the generations and over the years. We go back to the 80s when we first started listening to rap music. Rob and I, we both know Biz, personally. Grant, who's always on the show, loved Public Enemy. That was his thing. Woke me up every goddamn morning, listened to a Nation of Millions, holding us back when we were freshmen at Howard and we were roommates at Howard. This is what he listened to all the time. But the messages were different. It was a pro uplifting type of message. Now the messages that they send are be a hoe and do drugs and everything you sears it. And it's doubled down on with the way that the community is, because a lot of people don't see a way out of that. There's no options. And it really honestly, like, we're all intelligent brothers, but you just don't know what you don't know. And if you're never exposed to something, you just don't fucking know the other side of it. We can think about it. We all would like to hope that if we were in similar situations, and some of us have been in similar situations, that those things don't permeate everything else and take it all over. But for the majority of people, as Grant says, the 85s, they're not going to take the time to do that. They just need to be told what to do. So the reality of the world is that there are elites in this world that steward the rest of the community, whether or not they steward them for good or whether they steward them for bad. Really depends on the individual, the systems, and the times that we live. So we're going to go over just a little bit because I want to talk about this Columbia situation. Um, a lot of the Jewish students now are feeling like uncomfortable because of the um, pro-Palestinian protests that we've had online, that they've had there directly, and that what's going on there, and that a lot of colleges are picking up on that. And I was just wondering these are the things that these are the conversations you're not supposed to have. They don't want you to have. But it seems like the dam is breaking and the conversations are now being had, whether they like it or not. It's happening. This is what's going on. It's going on. And I just couldn't help but think that how long do you expect for people to watch something go on and not agree with it and them not actually to say anything about it? Robert Kraft today, he said that he's no longer going to give the Columbia. Apparently, he's a graduate of Columbia. And I don't blame him because the way that the media protected his ass when he got caught in that jerk off spot and everything, he better catch their back, honestly speaking. He better not come out and say, I'm for Palestine right now, or I'm for, but how far have we come as a society that having a conversation about unaliving, I have to say unaliving there. I can't even say the M word anymore. That's like you're not allowed to say that word. But we can't have this conversation. Why is that? These isn't a college campus supposed to be a place where you have your most virulent, strong conversations and debates about what's going on in the world? Why are
Who
these
told you that?
terms viewed as being so
Who
dangerous?
who told you that?
Listen,
Who told you that that's what colleges are for? Colleges are for churning out worker bees.
for some, I guess. But you know what? When I went to Howard, some of the best nights that I had at Howard were staying up late at night discussing different social, relevant, economic situations, positions, backgrounds, and we weren't all the same. You would think that, or some people are outsiders, and that's the way it always is. If you're an outsider, you think that everyone comes together. We're just a black university, so everybody there is a Democrat and liberal and this and that and this. But that's not the case. That's not what it is. There are rich people that come from to Howard. There are people with trust funds that go to Howard. There are people that are Republicans that go to Howard. And not just one person. It's not 1 in 10. We're talking about probably like 4 or 5 lean that way. We had great debate and conversations about different things. I don't understand why they are allowed to quash the conversation. I don't care about the outcome. The
Well,
conversation.
you're gonna can you give a specific example? Who quashed what conversation?
Well, what I'm seeing at Columbia right now is that for example, I saw a student who said, I'm a proud Jew as well as Zionist. And I don't feel comfortable going to class right now because of the protests that are going on. I feel like the environment is
Okay,
dangerous to me.
but so
Is
what?
that
So
more?
that's not an example of what you just said, though. Who is quashing what conversation?
Well, what they're actually doing is first of all, they're not really giving much of a voice to people that are actually protesting that feel that way.
Okay, well, that's contradictory. If they're protesting, they have a voice. So I'm not following what exactly is happening right now.
They're protester. There are different types of protests. You can sit
Mhm.
there and have a silent protest.
Right.
Go in front of You can go in front of get on a soapbox, and you
Okay.
can have that conversation.
Right. So
And the thing is that
all those rules for protesting have been around for a long time. So what's different?
what's different right now is that the heads of universities are being fired because they're not taking a strong enough action against these quote unquote protesters.
Who
That's the
who
difference.
give me a specific. What university fired the head of the university because they didn't take a strong enough position.
Well, what was it? The woman at Harvard? She got fired, quote unquote, for plagiarism, but we all know that wasn't plagiarism because anyone who's written in one of those papers understands that there's a give and take that goes along with your student advisor. It was never proven, but how she originally came to the public attention was the fact that she was one of the 4 professors that actually were asked about protesting and the Palestinian position that was being held by a lot of and what they were doing.
Yeah, and what she said
Squash
was
that.
so outrageous that of course she got fired, but what does that have to do with what you said?
The one in Columbia right now is also
You said that someone is quashing conversation. I wanna know who is quashing what conversation.
the person at Columbia, the president of Columbia right now, they're actually talking about ousting her now. They're
For
talking
what?
about firing her now because they don't like the way that she's handling these protests.
Okay, so what specifically like, right now, there's a lot of vagary, so I what specifically did she do wrong as in the accusation?
You see, that's the question you really have to ask them because they're the ones that are calling. No, it's true because they're the ones that are calling for her head. That's my exact. What you just the
So
question that
what
you
did they
asked,
say? What did
the
they say
question that
she
you
did
just
wrong?
they're
Mm,
saying that she's not being strong enough with the students and getting these protests stopped on campus.
okay.
They say that the environment is actually getting more
So
and
they're
more.
saying her job is to stop protests.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's a first for me, and I haven't followed any of this, but that doesn't sound logical to me that you're firing a head of a school for not stopping a protest. It sounds like maybe you don't have the information quite in line.
Or perhaps it sounds so outrageous that you can't believe that it could possibly be possible.
No, that's not. I believe anything is possible, but but you're not giving specifics, so I
Because there's
can't really
nothing
address this.
because unfortunately with the way that it's actually framed, it's almost impossible to give a specific.
But you did. You earlier started off with conversations are being quashed in college. That was your overarching theme. And I asked you to give me a specific, and you haven't been able to do that so far. And I'm not faulting you. I'm just stating that you haven't been able to give me the actual incidents that have taken place.
Well, I mean, all I see is the counteraction, and that's the problem. You see, what I see is
What's the counteraction?
the counteraction is the young man on CNN with the platform who's sitting up here speaking next to the 2 main hosts during a normal prime time saying that I am a student at Columbia University. I feel
So that's
like
okay. So that's one guy's idea of what's going on. What does that have to do with what
he's
we're talking about? He's not
representing
representing
the
anything.
community.
If he said, I feel this and that, he's not representing anybody.
He said, a lot of us don't feel comfortable and don't feel
So
safe
what?
in
So
our
what?
on our own
No
campus,
one, no
and we
one
want this.
on earth
They
or
literally
in America
stopped.
and anywhere else is responsible for this fucking guy's feelings.
Okay,
Okay.
then tell me why did Columbia stop
Nobody, no,
classes?
get safety is not guaranteed anywhere. It's not a right. The world is unsafe to a certain degree. It's safer now than it's ever been, but there's inherent dangers in the world. So why this guy's story does not interest me at all.
But why did they stop classes? Why did they go back to a online vehicle for these people right now? They're no longer doing these classes in person because they don't feel safe.
Which
Columbia
classes?
made this decision.
Which classes?
All classes. They've gone back to
All
the
Columbia
times
classes are online for the rest of the year.
Okay. And the reason why is
they don't feel safe.
okay. So they don't feel safe. Okay.
Nobody's been touched.
Okay, whatever.
Nobody's
We're
been
talking
touched.
about fucking feelings. Who gives a fuck? Okay, so these
Uh,
people in Colombia don't feel safe, and the school responded by putting classes online. So fucking what?
One small segment of people
Unfortunately,
uh,
feelings come into play far too much these days.
Right. And that's the whole
before
or maybe not
reason.
enough. Maybe part of the problem in America
Mm.
is that we're all looked at as fodder for the IRS, and no one's feelings are taken into account enough. Well, that's a much bigger conversation. But okay, so one college made a decision based on a current situation, and so what?
But Yoda, you gotta understand too, is that it's not just happening at Columbia. It's happening at a
Okay.
lot of the schools. It's not
How
just
many
one school.
colleges have done this?
This is what not to have went online, but what John was
Okay.
talking about, the protests.
Okay.
This is happening at multiple colleges all
What
throughout the
is happening
country.
exactly?
The protesting, the protesting with the Palestinians,
Yeah.
pro-Palestinian protests, and
Right.
some of the Jewish students who are going there are feeling
Uh-huh.
targeted. And
Okay.
so but what I'm saying is that it's not one isolated school. This is happening
Okay.
all over the place.
But how many schools responded the way Columbia did?
But Columbia is an
They
Ivy League
they are
school.
handling it in
So
different ways. I mean,
yeah,
Penn's another Ivy League school. They
correct.
fired their president.
Mhm.
They've had a couple donors pull major money out,
Okay.
which is, that's their
Okay.
right.
So far,
Mhm.
everyone said, my answer is so fucking what?
Mhm.
What is the overarching effect that this is having on society?
We'll find out.
Well, that's the
So then
answer.
nothing. So then
Well, that's
nothing.
the
It
answer.
can't be anything. It can't be anything that serious if there's no immediate danger or problem or like this is getting into the weeds of reality-based TV kind of mentality where we care that some students feel frightened. We have to create safe spaces for them. We care that one student head did this and one school did that. Who gives a fuck? What is the overarching issue?
Well, you said it with the first thing that you said. Why do we care that one student is having an issue
Right. So
with
what
going
is
to
the
class?
overarching issue? What is the problem that you're
The
trying to
problem is it
present?
shouldn't be a story at all. They shouldn't
That
have
well,
had they shouldn't have
that's
closed
irrelevant.
they
It's
shouldn't
it
have
is
closed
it should
classes.
it should
They
be a
shouldn't
story
have
because
closed
it is a
classes.
story.
These people should
It's
still
only a story because you brought it up.
these
So
kids
so it's
should
a story
still
because it should be a story.
these kids should still be going to
It
classes.
doesn't matter. Listen, this whole narrative of should and shouldn't is such a waste of time. It means nothing to say something that is shouldn't be or something that isn't should be. It's a useless conversation. This is what's happening, right? And if it's happening, it should be happening. But my question is, so fucking what? What is the big problem that this represents in America or anywhere else?
Well, anytime they want to tell you that they don't like something that you're talking about, that you're saying about them, they can shut you down. And the real problem is
Who
like
okay,
the real
okay, let
problem,
me
the real
wait,
problem
hold on, hold
is
on, hold on. Who has been shut down?
they're shutting down the opposing point of view in a way,
How? Who
in a
has
very
done that?
large way.
Give me a real life example of someone who has been shut down, and what does shut down mean?
Well, those students are if you're for that one person, all right, that one person who feels no, I'm gonna give
No,
you
no,
an
no, 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 no,
example.
no, no,
I'm
no.
gonna give you an
Not
example.
let me cut you off. Forget about what feelings. I need to know facts. Who was shut down?
If this
How
whole
and
thing is
by whom?
based upon feelings, the
No, no, no,
classes
no, no,
were
no, no, no,
shut
no, no, no.
down
I'm
because of
asking you. No, no,
feelings.
no, 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 no. If I'm asking you about reality, don't talk to me about feelings. I need to know. You said people are being shut down, multiples. So who is shutting down these people,
But the
and
causal
how were they
reason for
shut down?
shutting down the classes were this person's
They didn't shut down.
feelings.
Well, first of all, they didn't shut down the classes; they relocated them. So what?
They shut down the in-person. So what?
So
Their
what?
experience, part of their experience, and one of the reasons why they're paying $50, 50,000
So
a
what?
semester is to have these
So
students go and
what?
sit down and have an
So what?
interaction, active
Who gives
experience.
a fuck?
Those students,
So what?
those
So the
students
students
give
didn't
a
get what
fuck.
they wanted? The students' agenda wasn't met? So what?
Mm, I
Tell me
disagree
what's
with you.
really happening. Tell
I
me what's
disagree with
actually
you.
Okay. Oh, so
Disagree with you.
fine. Feel
What's
free to
actually
disagree.
happening?
But I need you to describe the real life effect that this has. Because so far, this is what I understand. And tell me if
But you
I'm
don't
missing.
want me to
uh,
describe it
No, 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 I do.
because
I
you don't
do.
want me to talk about feelings,
Because
and
I've asked
feelings
you,
are the real
because I
life
asked you,
effect.
no, no, no. I asked you for what happened. What does it mean?
It involves
Okay. So
feelings.
so some people's feelings are hurt. That's your point?
No, that's not my point.
So what is your point?
Some people's feelings are more important than yours.
And this is news?
Yeah, yeah,
Really? This is not
yeah,
how life has always been? You're
yeah,
just learning this now?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I
Okay.
am. But it's
All
just
right.
like it's such a big thing. It's like it's out in your face. Some
Okay.
people's feelings matter a lot more than yours.
All right.
And if you don't take control and you don't continue to speak up about these things, they're just going to continue to run over you. They're
But
probably going to
here's the
continue
thing.
to run
But
over
here's the
you too.
thing. No matter how much talking and speaking up and speaking out and protesting, this is still going to continue. This is a reality of the world, is that there's the haves and the have-nots, and the haves don't give a fuck about the have-nots.
So what you're saying is that there have never been any movements in the history of time where individuals came out and they spoke out and they took action against things that have actually changed the quality of life or the circumstances of life for individuals within their societies and their civilizations, or even their small peer groups.
No,
You're
I
saying
didn't
that
say
it's
that.
all
I didn't say that at all. I said that these things. Let me ask you something. When the voting rights happened in 1964, did blacks have free access to voting since that day?
of course not.
Okay. So since the Civil Rights Act, has everything been all right for black people since that day?
Of course not.
Oh, okay.
We've literally talked about it. But
Okay.
what that did do, what those acts did do is they
Mhm.
allowed for that was like it was a big thing putting it on the books. And
I
then
agree.
eventually there were a lot of areas that where they would have never had a voice and never gotten a chance to have control over their areas that maybe it didn't happen immediately, but maybe by like 8, 10 years later, they were able to change their circumstances. Now that that was a completely different societal situation and pod in which we all lived and we came up in. Just like this one with the internet, which allows us to actually have this conversation, good and bad, for and against, have came out. And now this is the new media and this is the new way that people are actually having these conversations. And for some people, it's actually been a spur for activism. There's a reason why they changed things. For example, Black Planet. I always love to talk about Black Planet. That was a great site, great spot, great site. They had the Jenna Louisiana trial, where those guys were they were about to be railroaded off for sitting underneath a tree. It was known as the White Tree. Black kids sat there. They ended up getting in a fight. The black kids ended up going to jail. The white kids ended up going to prom. Years later, what happened was because of activism that was mainly started on that website. They had the march in Jenna, Louisiana. Those kids actually got a fair trial, got released from prison. One of them went on to utilize his football contract, and now he's an attorney 20 years later. Sometimes we don't see the effect of things immediately, but if you give up and you allow things like this guy to get up here and say, my feelings are hurt without having the discussions, then you're right. Whatever we get, we have to accept it. Born in Trouble, 44th episode. Chocolate Yoda. Namaste. Thank you for being on the show today, hosting the Persistent Rumor. Anything you'd like to say to people before we let it go?
No, man, always a fun conversation. I've always enjoyed your content, and I always appreciate being able to participate. So thank you once again.
Thank you, Chocolate Yoda. I don't think that because we disagree, you won't get another invitation because, of
No,
course, that is what
it's
we
not.
are
It's
here
not
for.
personal. Well, it's not personal. These are just ideas. Because
I know.
you know, I'm happy to toss around ideas, and I happen to be a very passionate person, but you know, it's nothing personal. No hurt feelings on my end. I hope there's no hurt feelings on anybody's end.
Definitely not. This is not a bitch ass podcast. Mr. Andrew Johnson.
Fellas, once again, I think this time my IQ score actually went up a couple points. So
Oh my God.
good episode. Good episode.
Oh my God. I'm gonna have to work on that. That's not the goal of the podcast. Fellas. Andrew Johnson, thank you. What's your podcast again? The 313.
The 313 Men, Money, and Marriage.
Money, money, and money for your ladies. if you think
Money,
you
money, money.
money, 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 and of course, my fellow Indian.
Spartan.
We'll never be Spartans.
We're Spartans now.
We'll never, no, bro, we won't. No, we're not Spartans. Listen, I love you, brother, and everything, and I will kill for you if necessary. Oh, sorry, I'll lie for you if necessary. We don't need to do the rest of the bonding, though. Even though there's nothing wrong with that. Mr. Robert Brooks was the good looks.
My man, Johnny Jackson. What up?
Johnny, yes, that's right. And by the way, like, we have no problem with people doing exactly what they do, to whom they do, whenever they do it, because we come from the home of the free lovers. That's right. Formerly Modern Times. Free lovers. Brentwood. One in Trouble. 44th episode. Thank you, everybody, for watching and tuning in. Peace.
Peace.